Well, hello. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to say good morning to my friends and colleagues that are just a little bit west of here. I'm located in the Eastern Time, but I know for some of you it is still morning. But my name is Doug Bouws, and I am Vice President for Client Services with Money for Ministry, and your host for our webinar today, Fundraising in Times of Economic Uncertainty. And we have a special guest with us today, Stephen Screen, co-founder of the Better Fundraising Company. As I was looking over the list of those who have registered for today's webinar, we have development directors, gift officers, executive directors, pastors, so many others. It is great to be together in this wonderful work. Supporting these important causes that we all give our lives to. And I am so grateful for everyone on the call today. So as Stephen and I were preparing for our conversation today, two goals or outcomes became apparent to me. One, I hope that we can bring some comfort and hope during this season when many are really wondering or asking what's around the corner. And two, but I hope you leave with some specific strategies and some ideas of what you can do in the months ahead. So I'm really excited for what we're going to be talking about today. I trust you are too. Folks are continuing to log on. I'd like to just go over a couple of housekeeping details as we get started here. There's two buttons at the bottom of your screen that you're going to want to be aware of. The first is a question and answer button, and if you click that, it will open a box. And you can type questions in there as we go. I invite you to do so. As is typical, we have set aside significant time at the end where we will take questions live. So if something comes to mind that you're not quite sure about, you want to know more about, please ask us. We'll get to as many as we can. And even if we don't get to them live, we'll have someone reach out to you afterwards to try to address whatever question that you have. There is also another button at the bottom of your screen, a chat button, which will open a chat window. And this is an opportunity for you to engage with each other during our time today. And I would invite you, I'd like to kick that off and invite you to enter one word, just one word. Of course, if you're going to do more than that, I can't stop you. But again, the invitation is one word. What is your biggest challenge / priority? So you're going to have to pick one, because I said one word, but your biggest challenge or priority as you look ahead to the next 3 months. And you can go ahead, you can start typing that right now. While those are being typed in, I will just mention that the webinar is being recorded. People often ask about that, and you'll receive a link sometime later this week. You can share that with your team. Anybody who wasn't able to be here live is welcome to view that. And then stay tuned a little bit later in the call. You'll have an opportunity to sign up for a free consultation, either with someone from the Money for Ministry team or with someone from the Better Fundraising team. If there's something you heard today you want to learn a little bit more about, we'd love to take some time to help you understand and to answer those questions as well. Well, let's get started. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Stephen Screen. Stephen has been fundraising for, there he is, hey Stephen, in his, what we've been calling his chic basement digs. There you are. So great to have you on. You've been,
thank you, Doug,
for more than 25 years involved in fundraising. You're the co-founder of the Better Fundraising Company. And in the first half of his career, Stephen served much larger national nonprofits than he does now, but helping them to grow their files through direct mail, TV, and radio. And now in the second half is translating those best practices that he learned with large nonprofits into what works with medium. I just created a new category of nonprofit, but a small to medium nonprofit here in North America. Stephen is the past winner of Fundraising Success's Direct Mail Package of the Year and invented the popular Ask, Thank, Report, Repeat fundraising rhythm. And his goal is to radically increase fundraising capacity of those medium-sized nonprofits for years to come. So welcome, Stephen. We're so glad to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Doug. And it's already been a productive time together because medium is now going to be part of my lexicon moving forward.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you know? Well, we want to talk today about better fundraising in times of economic uncertainty. And as I reflected on this, I think if we think back the last 3 years, we have been really in 3 years of economic, or at least cultural world uncertainty, if we want to broaden our experience of that. Uh, October of 2019, I suspect most of us were not quite yet aware of a pandemic called COVID-19 that was coming, but it was on the horizon and it was soon there in front of all of us. And that created a ton of uncertainty. Maybe I could say for some uncertainty, for others, they were certain it was going to cripple donations. And of course, what we experienced, most nonprofits, was the exact opposite of that, and they experienced record donations in 2020. Now, I'll say not all. I know of thinking of two clients in particular. They were especially event-driven, and they were hit pretty hard during the pandemic. So it's not everyone, but for the most part, nonprofit giving, fundraising grew tremendously, and it was a banner year. And then came 2021, and we all thought, now this can't possibly continue, but the pandemic really had not subsided. It kind of came in waves and left, but 2021 was another a banner year for most fundraising. And now here we are in 2022. The market has dropped. Supply chain issues have really made it difficult for a lot of different industries. And so inflation has soared, and interest rates as a result of that are climbing, and people are wondering what's ahead. There's lots more uncertainty. And so it's into that climate and context that we are in today. Stephen, here's my question. What does this mean as we approach year end, and especially as we look ahead to 2022?
Well, so first of all, good question. Big picture, I hope everybody sort of walks into this year-end's fundraising season learning the big lesson of the last 3 years, which is that fundraising can go great in times of economic uncertainty, and that donor generosity is sort of unbowed. It's an incredible, we live in a fundraising friendly world with generous donors who want to help, who care about the things that we work on. And the numbers back that up for organizations that were able to be in contact with their donors, i.e. not the event-driven organizations. So be heartened, be confident. Just because things are going sideways, or maybe even we're worried that they're going sideways, that does not mean bad things for your fundraising. So what do you do, right? It's nice to be heartened, but what do you do? So I've got a couple sort of principles for people that I have seen work over the last, well, this will be my 29th year-end fundraising campaign. So here in times of economic uncertainty are the main principles to keep your fundraising up as high as you can, and maybe even better than in previous years. Number one would be to stay the course. Don't cancel any fundraising. You need to be sold out to your mission and to your beneficiaries, and be advocating for them, whether it's a recession or not, a pandemic or not. I think it's our job as fundraisers to advocate for our beneficiaries and our causes, and then let donors make the decisions. That's really key there, that last bit, letting donors make decisions, because we don't want to take that decision out of a donor's hands by choosing not to fundraise to them. Give donors the chance to be the heroes that they would like to be. Give them the chance to support the causes and beneficiary groups that they care for. So that's sort of principle number one. Principle number two would be to make your case stronger than ever. This is not the time to be less urgent than normal. It's the time to be more urgent than normal. That's basically for sort of two main reasons. Number one, the media is talking about a lot of things other than your cause right now. We're focused on the election, on recession rates, on supply chain issues, on all that stuff. And so all that attention is off whatever you're working on for most nonprofits, churches, ministries, prayer churches, all that stuff. So we've got to urgently get people's attention back on our cause. And then the second thing is, if there is a recession, say the average donor is given to 10 charities, she might cut back and give to 8 charities during this year end. So let's make sure that our charities are in the 8. And we're not going to make sure our charities are in the 8 by going quiet. So again, I guess, Doug, the 2 other final thoughts are that some organizations may experience a drop in revenue, but that drop in revenue is, meaning they may keep fundraising and experience a drop in revenue, but that drop will be far smaller if you keep fundraising as opposed to just going quiet. Then the drop has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Final thought for us is that it's really good to remember that many donors will not be affected at all by the economic downturn. A lot of folks have made more money than they would have ever believed over the last 3 years. A lot of folks are sitting pretty and they're just fine. They care about your cause. They care about your beneficiaries and would love to help right now, and even know that some other people won't be in a position to give. So don't take those folks, don't remove their ability to help by deciding that it's a bad time to ask. So those are the main principles that we've seen help organizations succeed in times like this.
So, okay, so I love this. This is great. And I want to push on it a little bit, because I think there has to be then an assumption, or at least a concern, that when you say stay the course, that fundraisers are saying, maybe I better not stay the course, or maybe I'm tempted to pull back. And I guess if you could say a little more about that, what are some of the tendencies, temptations, anxieties, fears that would cause us to not stay the course, or maybe push us in a different direction that we shouldn't go?
Yeah, well, you said the core word, which is fear. Fundraising is for many people an awkward thing to do. And it's not that I'm just labeling some people that way. It's a vulnerable thing to ask for money. And almost nobody in the fundraising industry is trained to do it. Almost nobody writing fundraising letters was really trained to do it. So there are all these things about fundraising that bring up people's own fears about rejection, about driving donors away. So it's an awkward, vulnerable thing anyway to be asking for money. Then you get into economic uncertainty, and you want to be caring for your donors who you love, and so you don't want to bother them. So there's another reason to not ask them. And then there's the more fear-based reason, which is you hear from donors, board members who are close into the organization, who are stakeholders that you're in a relationship with. And they say, oh man, it's a tough time. Oh, I can't give this year. Oh, it's awkward. And so some of the people that you're hearing from are talking openly about these things. And then we assume that all donors are that way. And that assumption is the thing that I would caution against, because not all donors are that way. The numbers are super clear that not all donors are that way. Many people will still support the cause. And so we have to be willing to do the slightly awkward step of sending out fundraising, even though we know we're going to get some no's. But we're not doing it for us, right? We're not doing this job to self-actualize. We're doing this on behalf of our beneficiaries. And so we need to step out in faith and do it for them.
Love it. I love that's one of the things I heard in that, Stephen, that was helpful to me is just acknowledging that the fear is real, that the fear is there's others who you're not alone in the fear, and it's not something that you should feel bad about or ashamed about, but it's also not something that should hold you back. It's time to
Yeah.
continue to stay the course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you talk too just about advocating for your clients, your beneficiaries, the people you serve. Like this is what puts you in mission. This is what drives you to continue to do it. Good stuff. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned experiencing a drop in revenue, but again, following the course, stay the course. Is there data to support this? Or I mean, it would seem like the other fear is, well, and I'm not going to have a lot of money, so maybe I shouldn't spend a lot of money. How is there data to give me confidence I can just plunge ahead and it will be okay?
Yeah, let's see. I couldn't point you to a particular study that that Bouws and team discovered this in 2007. That said, I think that anybody who has done this for a while has watched lots of nonprofits and ministries ask less and raise less. And I think almost everybody in the fundraising industry would agree that overall, sort of less is less. If you're going to ask less and even steward less, you're going to raise less money. And so what happens when we are worried about bothering our donors, worried about them leaving due to sort of the mythical donor fatigue? We ask less, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The part of the fundraising ecosystem that I come from teaches you a lesson that you basically never go dark on your donors. And the sooner you go dark, and that means stopping all forms of communication, asking, thanking, reporting, stewardship, whatever you want to name it. The more you go dark, the less money you raise. There is a clear correlation between those two things. That's really tough. It's almost unfair for small organizations, by the way, right? They don't have the staff and the manpower to constantly be churning stuff out. But it's really, there's a truth that's really good to remember. And that truth is the big organizations that are sending out lots of emails, 100 fundraising emails a year, 16 appeals, and 12 newsletters. Those organizations are big because they do that. They don't do that because they are big. They grow, they do that as a way to stay in touch with their donors. And so what does that truth tell you? That truth tells you that you need to stay in front of your donors regardless of the economic situation, regardless of what month it is, to give yourself the best chance at success.
You said something a moment ago, the mythical donor fatigue. We get that question a lot in our work about giving. Our donors tired of planned giving. I had never heard someone label it the myth, which I find, because we don't experience it that way either. There's constantly interest out there, but again, there's I guess maybe if I can summarize what I'm hearing from you is there's this sense that the donors, we don't want to be too forward, or we don't want to be too much in their face. We don't want to burden them and wear them out with our asks. And you're telling us, not true. Keep going.
Not true. Keep going. And let's see. I'm trying to figure out how to do this quickly, and I have one sort of fun thing to say. I'll lead with a fun thing, but most folks know the C.S. Lewis quote about the smartest thing the devil ever did was to make us think he doesn't exist. In the fundraising version of that quote would be something like, the smartest thing the devil ever did was make us think asking too many times was a problem. Because that causes us to ask less, to let donors do less, and to do less mission work. So that's just a little sort of fun, but I think truthful way to look at it. But yeah, so in my big agency days, we monitored like crazy for donor fatigue. And the two things we always watched were donor retention and net revenue, both of which are measurable. Right? Super measurable, down to multiple decimal points. Whereas donor fatigue is not measurable. It's a feeling that people get.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start less watching for the feeling people get, who are usually insiders, who open up all of your pieces of communication, who read everything, which is a completely different group of people than the non-insiders who don't open up everything, who don't read the whole thing. As long as you got to pay attention to complaints, of course, and to what you're hearing on the street. And if any one individual donor says she does not want to be on your mailing list or doesn't want to get as many appeals, pay attention to that. But if rather than think about how we feel about donor fatigue, instead of that, measure net revenue and donor retention rates, that's your key to when you're doing enough fundraising as opposed to too much. And you basically never see it. I was up to, I mean, this is 15 years ago, I was up to 24 appeals, printed appeals, and 12 printed newsletters a year for an organization before the data said we should be contacting them less. The data said. And I'm not arguing that anybody on this call should be talking to their donors that many times. I say that just as a boundary expanding. If you really look at it like a scientist and you're measuring net revenue and donor retention rates, more is better than less.
That's love. It reminds me, we served a ministry once and they were making 2 appeals a year, and we suggested they go to 4, and they thought that was too much. And and I guess from what I'm hearing from you is to say, you know, you'll know when it's too much, but 4 is probably not too much for most.
Yeah.
For most.
Well, there is a general truth that every organization feels like 2 more would be too many. And if every organization feels that way, that says that that's an internally driven feeling, right? If the organization that's sending 2 appeals feels the same way as the organization sending 8 versus sending 14, if they all feel that 2 more would be too many, that's really interesting, because that means it's all coming from internal and not the data.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Thank you.
Great.
The data can relieve our anxiety and steer us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you still have to have sort of the faith to step out, even though it feels a little odd to mail 2 more times, or to send 2 more emails, or to call that major donor, right? That's still hard. I don't want to take anything away from those real boundaries that we have, and that I think are sort of unfortunately set in expectations in nonprofit fundraising world. But if you can sort of, on behalf of your beneficiaries, push past those. I've never in my career worked with an organization that pushed past those boundaries and was like, nope, that's too much money, we're dialing it back. They never dial it back. Once they start doing more, they see that it works. And that's the reason people keep doing it.
And another thing I heard in there was something about on behalf of your beneficiaries. Maybe that's another way to think about. We haven't talked about guilt in any of this, but if there's any hesitation, maybe if your beneficiaries helps you think again about what you're doing, why you're doing, and why it matters. But it was just a little word I heard in there that I thought,
Well, yeah, real quick, we find that most people experience more fear in fundraising when they are effectively asking for themselves. Will you support me? Will you support my organization? Will you join us so that we can help the beneficiaries? Right? That is a totally different thing than donor, will you help the beneficiaries? Then you're a messenger, as opposed to asking for support and having your own ego involved. So that little shift too matters for folks.
Excellent. Well, there's so much in this that you're sharing, Stephen, that reminds me of, and many of the ministries on the call today represent folks who are also trying to grow their planned giving pipeline. And they too say, well, you know, during times of uncertainty like this, maybe we need to pull back. And I get it. I think, you know, one of the things that we hear a lot in planned giving is that it's deferred money. It's not now money. And so that's a real need. Ministries need to keep the lights on. They need to keep paying the salaries. They want to be able to keep serving. I think there's at least 4 opportunities in planned giving that are worth sharing and thinking about. And really, as you shared in terms of general fundraising, resonate with me in terms of planned giving. So the first is this: don't forget about donor advised funds. And I know they are increasingly popular. People are paying more and more attention to them. But donor advised funds are inflation proof. The money has already been given, and you're not competing with dollars that are aimed for other needs or necessities. And if you don't know who your donor advised fund donors are, I highly recommend that you start to track them. We help ministries figure that out, but you can just look at where your gifts are coming from. So more reasons to do planned giving in an uncertain economy. The second would be charitable gift annuities. We've written some pieces on finding certainty in uncertain times, and a charitable gift annuity is a great way to do that. We actually did a webinar earlier this year, I think it was in February, on all the nuts and bolts of charitable gift annuities. But a donor gives you money, gives money now and then receives a payout for life. So it's a great, this is a huge opportunity here in uncertain times to talk about charitable gift annuities. And the third would be, many of your donors have IRAs, and if they're over age 72, they have a required minimum distribution. And as we've already seen in the past years of the pandemic, these people's ability to give has not been affected, and so there's another opportunity to focus on. The fourth would be, and this one might seem counterintuitive to a fundraiser, but I think it really makes sense to the donor, which is to say bequests and marketing for bequests. This could be probably the best time to do it because it doesn't cost them anything right now. So from your perspective, that hurts. As a ministry, that's hard because you still need money now. But from their perspective, they can still be generous, and it doesn't cost them anything. I love the story it was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy a couple of years ago. The Nature Conservancy here in the United States, it's a large national charity, but they invested heavily in planned giving in the 80s. And today they are seeing 20 to 25% of their income each year come from deferred gifts, including bequests that have been settled. It was over 100 million in the 5 years preceding that report. So just, you can almost recession-proof yourself by building up a pipeline. Now, I like to say we're planting trees under whose shade you and I probably won't sit, the current person and whoever's listening today. But again, if there's a lesson here, I think it's to think hard about the long term, even when the short term is right in front of you and staring you in the face. But the opportunities for the organization for generations to come are there and strong. So lots of opportunity. Again, sometimes counterintuitive, but perhaps a way to recession-proof your nonprofit, your ministry for decades to come. So Stephen, what else do you recommend in times like these, maybe in terms of fundraising strategy or messaging?
Well, let's see. A couple things. Be highly focused on major donors, because they're, at least for organizations where individuals are driving a large portion of an organization's fundraising revenue, the small group of majors, usually 10% of the file, maybe 15% of the file, are providing 85% of the revenue. And so make sure that you have identified those top donors, especially the ones that you're in a relationship with, and make a special effort to reach out to them. You want your organization to be fresh in their mind as we approach year-end fundraising, especially if you need to talk to them about making some sort of special gift. So our relationships with our major donors right now are incredibly important. A couple other things. If we officially enter a recession, make sure that as quickly as possible in an organization's reporting back to donors, when they show donors work that has been accomplished, you want to, as quickly as possible, make your reporting on work that's been done recently. For instance, so say I'm just making stuff up here, but say there's an announcement or an agreement that we're in a recession on November 15th, and then we've got a newsletter coming out that shares a story that happened last January. that is not as relevant all of a sudden because the world has changed. So when there are big changes in the world, whether it's a war or a pandemic or a recession, as quickly as possible, pivot your reporting to be on things that have happened urgent so that you're showing impact now to your donors, as opposed to what you did in the past. So that's sort of reporting. And then when we're asking our donors for gifts, this is appeals, e-appeals, events, major donor asks. As quickly as possible, be talking to donors about how their gift is A, needed more than ever right now, and B, it's going to focus on meeting the current needs of the organization that are affected by the recession or inflation or supply chain issues. It is, generally speaking, a better approach to say to a donor, hey donor, here's what's going on, your gift will help. That is a better approach than, hey donor, here's a bunch of stuff that happened in the past, we already took care of it, will you join us? Right? That's like joining you for your stuff that happened in the past, as opposed to helping meet a need that exists today and tomorrow. Those are two different asks, and the former, help a donor meet a need that's happening now, works a lot better.
That's probably true anytime, right? Or is that okay?
Yep.
But,
true anytime, especially true now.
Especially.
I guess two other little things, Doug. Number one is that if an organization is experiencing increased costs and has any type of shortfall, share that shortfall with your donors. Donors get it. There has never been higher awareness of increased costs, lower revenue in some cases, and donors understand shortfall problems. They know we are nonprofits. They've all been short a time or two in their life, so they know what that's like. And shortfall appeals, shortfall campaigns work great. Final thing to say is that major donor giving in the US really seems to have slowed down in the last couple of weeks. And we are predicting that it's going to be slow until after the midterms. I think it's going to rebound, but I think right now everyone is just sort of keeping their powder dry to see how all of this turns out. And I think the fears are, the fears are at level 8 when they should be at level 4. We're a little overly worried. But majors seem to be being pretty cautious. So if you have a big major donor ask planned in the next couple weeks, if you can move it back a couple weeks until after the elections, I would try to do that. And if it's happening in the next couple weeks, I'd be prepared with a sort of plan B that might be, oh, donor, you are going to give less. Maybe could you give less now and then more at the beginning of the year? Maybe make it a pledge. Anyway, have some strategies like that lined up.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I think a lot of us overlooked that. I mean, we got about 3-4 weeks here before November 8, and you expect, and that's a trend that's fairly well established, but may require some, like you said, some adjustments. So let's not get caught blindsided here on the wrong foot. Let's be prepared. But I love that. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Great.
Super helpful. You mentioned earlier about the shortfall, to share that, and I think you mean, sometimes I'll hear fundraisers talk about, how often can you cry wolf or can you sound the alarm? Is there a limit to shortfall sharing that you've ever experienced?
Yeah, the limit seems to be once a year.
Okay.
But you can do it. I mean, shortfalls are sort of like matching grants. They work great. You can use them more than you think. You can't use a shortfall as often as a matching grant, but the negative consequences of doing a shortfall appeal are usually fears felt by insiders and don't come true. Just as an example, I did a $500,000 shortfall campaign for a large organization with 120,000 donors, and they were desperately worried about complaints. We did sessions with the board to help them be able to talk to friends and neighbors because they were so worried, and there were less than 5 complaints.
Wow.
And 2 of the 5 ended up giving donations on the spot once they were talked to in a way that sort of explained what was going on to them. So, and that's a good rule of thumb. I find that on average, about a third of complaints can be turned into donations on the spot.
Super hopeful, Stephen. I love this.
Great.
I want to pivot here. We have a few slides. We probably won't get to all of them, but just some, I'm going to say pithy, cogent, just very quick lessons, fundraising lessons that you put together. I think we've in some ways touched on all of these in some form, but maybe we can use this. I'd love to just turn you loose, let you talk about each of these kind of briefly, and see where that goes.
Yep. Well, this hits on this one that you're showing right now hits on the very first one that we talked about, fears driving our fundraising stuff, and sort of putting boundaries around donors' generosity. We're worried about being wrong. We're worried about complaints. We're worried about it going away. But if you really look at the numbers, you see that, on average, you're losing between sort of 30% and 60% of your donors every single year. So why are we so worried about donors going away when a lot of them are going away anyway? The cost of inaction is greater than the cost of a fundraising piece that isn't quite right. So it's just too often fears set our boundaries. And I think we all know this from our personal lives. When fears set our boundaries, those boundaries tend to be pretty limiting.
Yeah. Yep. I love how you start. Most nonprofits under communicate, again, driven by fear. But if listeners today haven't heard us say over and over again, don't be afraid, continue to communicate, then they must have been sleeping, I guess. But no, this is great.
Yep, and to speak to that, everybody's got a couple people at their organization that say, "Oh, you're communicating too much. Oh, the donors are about to leave. Oh, I talked to so and so," but those are always sort of anecdotal. One piece of data, right? It's you do a campaign, you get 732 gifts and 2 complaints, but somehow the 2 complaints run the show. And that's an improper view, I think.
Well, okay. I think if there's another theme that I've heard from you, it's that so much of our fundraising is driven by the people who are closest to us, either the staff members we work with, our board, but people who are in the know at a pretty deep level. And that's just not true for the majority of people who love our work and love what we do.
Yep, it's just not true. And it's especially not true if you want to scale. Right? If you've got a couple hundred donors and everybody sort of knows each other or is 1 degree removed, then everybody sort of knows more about the organization and you can talk about your organization at a higher level. But if you want to scale and talk to the massive numbers of people who would like to support your organization, who don't know as much and aren't connected to anybody there, you have to talk differently about the organization. So the slide in front of us, major donor activities in order of importance. This is just, it's just sort of major donor stuff 101. Retain your current major donors. They're a major source of revenue. Then number 2, try to lift them. Try to reactivate your lapsed, and then look for new major donors. A lot of organizations, they will just spend a little too much time trying to find new major donors, and not enough time trying to retain the revenue from their majors and all their existing majors.
And isn't that we believe what's probably false is that it would be easier. Maybe we're sick or tired, or the relationships we currently have are mundane and old, and we're looking for something fresh and new. Yeah, awesome. Let's maybe take 1 or 2 more of these. 2 times to not listen to your donors. Talk about that.
Yeah, so when I guess I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but when donors tell you that they want to be asked less, you should listen to them on a donor by donor basis, but not let a single donor's preferences drive your communication policy. Because as a rule, donors almost always say they'd like to be asked less, because no one likes to sort of hear about the evils and injustices in the world, right? That is not a preferred activity for most humans. However, if you look at the data, if you ask your donors less often, they will give less often, even when they say that they will give as much or more. So I've just seen this happen a number of times. So that is, listen to people's preferences, but one person's preference drive your policy. And then also when organizations tell you how they want, or excuse me, when donors tell you how they want to be asked. Because humans, as a rule, we're not particularly good at explaining why we do things. So listen, let's see, I used to do a lot of focus groups, and in focus groups, one of the things we would do is we would show donors direct mail pieces that they had given to, that they had got in their mailbox and sent in a check from. And the donors would tear the direct mail pieces apart and say, this is awful, it's overly simplistic, it's playing on my emotions. I would never give to this. All of whom had given to it, but they didn't remember. And so, but I want to draw a clear distinction here, that what I'm talking about here is really true for mass and mid donors. But if you know a major donor who does not like your direct mail and really would rather have lunch with you, by all means, take them out of your direct mail. No problem. But again, don't let that donor's preference drive your policy. You can pay attention to that donor's preference because they're a major donor, but you can't pay attention to everybody's preferences. The reason these tools and these tactics still exist so much, and all of the big organizations are using them, are because they are so successful. And when you get big enough to start getting the occasional complaint or pushback, that's a sign that you're large enough and doing enough fundraising to make it to the next level.
Great. This is I love kind of unpacking. There's so much of the psyche involved in all of this, but it's a fascinating conversation. We got so much we could talk about. We do have some questions that we want to get to, so I'd like to shift.
Great.
At this time
love
that. Before we
I love questions.
Yeah, we mentioned at the outset that you have the opportunity to request a free consultation with either someone from the Money for Ministry team or Stephen and someone from his team. So there should be a poll that appears on your screen here, and you can check either yes, please put me in touch with someone, or no, not at this time. And either way, that will make the poll go away, so you can continue to see either our screen or your screen, whatever's in front of you. But let's shift to some of these questions that were, there are a few questions that have come up in the live Q&A box, and we'll be happy to take those. There were also questions submitted to us through the registration process. And I'd like to start with a couple of those and to kick off this time. But again, we'll continue to go at the live ones as they appear. But first of all, here, question number one: as year-end approaches, I'm really starting to worry about meeting our fundraising goals. I hear the growing concern in the voices of my colleagues as well, but I don't want to make decisions out of fear. There's that word. What can I do to help my team and improve our situation?
I'll give the short answer, because I feel like the last 44 minutes were an answer to this question. But you're right to recognize the fear. Stay the course, ask strongly, make the case for why a gift is needed now, and focus on majors.
There you go. Repeat that again so somebody can write it down who was trying to capture. I think we had 4 points.
Stay the course, ask strongly and urgently, focus on majors. And I think the first one was just to acknowledge the fear.
Yeah.
That fear is real, right? I'm not here saying just forget about the fear. It's easy. That fear is real. We all have to sort of embrace that and sort of stretch our muscles in a way that is a little painful. In the same way, right, that working out actually tears our muscle fibers a little bit in painful ways, that causes our muscles to grow larger and stronger. And
Mm,
that analogy is good for this. We need to tear our muscles a little bit, sending out 2 more appeals, making 2 more major donor asks, right? In a way that's a little painful in order to grow.
excellent. There is a question live here that was asking, what does it mean to lift your major donors? I think that was a reference to the slide. I think you may have just touched on it, but can you say a little bit about that lift question? What does that mean?
Sure. So let's see. Let's see. The best run major gifts programs tend to be trying to lift their donors to higher levels of giving every year. Right? Like if a donor is giving you $5,000 every year like clockwork, that's actually not a good sign. It's not a bad sign, but it's not a good sign. So you want to lift them. So for each major donor under management on a caseload or in a portfolio, you usually have a gift target that you're trying to lift that major to that year that is higher than they gave last year.
Excellent. Super. Thank you.
Great.
All right, so we're going to take that question about fear and we're going to shift it. So the first one had to do with internally the team, the fundraising team. The second one has to do with the donors themselves. Maybe some donors have fears. So this person says, I'm really worried about worried people will lower their capital pledges out of fear and a growing uncertainty about the future. How can I help them build their confidence?
Well, let's see. That worry is well placed, especially right now, as in the time this time of uncertainty before the election. I mean, as far as, let's see. I mean, I guess there are 2 things to mention here. One, when I'm talking to those capital pledges or capital campaign donors, I am talking to them about how this is happening. This campaign is winning. We are still moving on this because the need for it is so great. So I'm trying to sort of not really even to acknowledge what's going on in the world that much. It's silly to act in a vacuum, but you've got to focus on the need for this thing. And again, if the capital donors are often sort of giving to lots of organizations at once and often giving to multiple capital campaigns at once. And so you want to continue to make the case for yours, why their money at that amount is needed now, so that if they lower some of their pledges, it's not yours that gets lowered.
And I love the caution about living in a vacuum, and yet really the invitation to be bold and assertive and confident about the mission that you represent and the work that you're inviting these donors into is so important. Wow.
Yep. And fundraising is tough, right? Especially in that context, because you really need to be warm and friendly and love the donor and advocate for your cause and the goal and the role that they play in the campaign. It's both and. It's both and.
But I think I've heard you say elsewhere too that by advocating for the campaign, you're really offering them an opportunity to become part of solving the problem, as opposed to inviting them to help you solve the problem. You're taking that the middle person out and bringing these 2 relationships together.
Make it about their role in the campaign, their role in the number of kids that will learn dance once the new facility is built, their role in the amount of fresh, disease-free water that will be delivered. Make it about those outcomes rather than your support of organization and of our organization and our plan to do the thing that we want to do.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm catching, there are some questions here. They're all showing up in the chat, so I'll do my best to grab them because, but one of them has to do about staying the course. Are you saying that we do the same campaign we did last year?
Yes. I mean, presuming we're talking about a year-end campaign that might have, 2 direct mail letters, phone calls to majors, emails at the end of the year. Yes, do that campaign. Don't not do it because of the current environment.
Okay.
I hope that answers it.
Yeah, we'll see if a follow-up shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see, here's another one. I heard other fundraising professionals say, this is about the shortfall now. So not to focus on the shortfall, but to focus on the impact of the giving. Can you address the balance that needs to be part of this, or if there's a best approach there?
In my experience, and I have sent hundreds of shortfall pieces of direct mail and emails, is that you lead with the shortfall, tell the donor, I mean, they're basically sort of 4 points here. We'll see if I can get it. You lead with that you have a shortfall. You tell the donor that their gift will help erase the shortfall. You tell the donor the consequences of not erasing the shortfall, and which are negative. And then you tell the donor the impact of their giving. So and those are the good things that will continue if the donor gives.
There you go. Okay, I wrote it down this time, so I didn't have to make you repeat it, because
great.
They're so, I love, it's so succinct and so, again, just spot on. Pithy is the word that comes to mind. But okay, so lead with a shortfall. Your gift will help. Tell them the consequences of not meeting the shortfall, and then ultimately tell them the impact, the good that they will do.
Yep. And most organizations will shy away, and most consultants will shy away from talking about the shortfall too much, talking about the negative consequences of the shortfall. But it is a truth that most organizations don't talk enough about the needs that they or their beneficiaries face and the consequences of not meeting those needs. There's a built-in assumption that if things are going great, more people are going to fund us. And some of that is true, but you need a mix of both the, hey, real needs are happening and you can meet them, and real needs have happened and you have met them. You need both of those.
Good. Well, Richard, who asked us about the state of the course, did write back. So it says, yes, of course we will do a campaign, but are you saying the campaign should be exactly as last year or tailored for current reality? So maybe the messaging he might be.
Oh, yeah. So the messaging should be, the fancy word here is contextualized for this year. So, right, there should be a campaign in there about, excuse me, a campaign. There should be a couple of paragraphs in there, however you think about your messaging, about what's going on this year and how it's affecting your beneficiaries. And then tell the donor that their gift will help stop those bad things from happening and do all of the good things that your organization does. We saw a lot of campaigns from big national ministries and organizations this summer that were effectively inflation campaigns. Costs have gone up, the price of corn has gone up this much, the price of flour has gone up this much, the price of gas has gone up this much. Please send in a gift to help. And they worked great, because everybody knew about and were experiencing their own gas is a lot, milk is more, all that stuff. So yes, we need to sort of arrive in the donor's world with context that says that you are writing from the same world that they're in, and then ask them to help.
Awesome, love it. I think we got time for maybe one more question here, and this this comes from the registration report. Oh, there's two here. We'll see how much time we have.
I'll go fast.
Well, I'm relatively new to our organization. I don't have established relationships with many of our donors. How do I communicate so people know I'm concerned with them more than with their money, especially when we don't know each other? And I could just imagine there's probably an urgency here to get to know donors quickly. Like, how do you ask for marriage on the first date, maybe?
Yep. Well, let's see. To this person, I would say focus on the things you know to be true, which is a shared value about your the cause or beneficiaries that your organization helps. So focus the communication there. So this is something like Mr. and Mrs. Donor. I know you care about the unicorns. Your generosity has shown that again and again and again. It's a pleasure to get to be part of your work to save the unicorns. And I'm writing this year because, and then you're into whatever's going on with the poor example of unicorns that we're trying to do this year. But start with the shared value, and then you'll come to know them over time, and they'll come to see that you're concerned over time about them too.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, one more. We are currently in the midst, and this is a specific, in the midst of trying to retain a significant donor who didn't like the way we handled COVID-19. I actually think I know the backstory here. It had to do with mask mandates and response to that. What should we do? How do we talk to somebody? Maybe a little off. It's reflective of what's going on in our world.
Yeah. Yep. Well, this is happening more and more, and it's hard for organizations. But I sort of, and full acknowledgement, this is easier for me to say than it is to do. But as an organization, you need to decide if you believe in the way that you're doing for things. If you're doing things, whether it was COVID, mask mandates, whatever, you need to stand by those beliefs and know that you might lose a donor or three. That's a consequence. That consequence is a smaller negative than the consequence of kowtowing to donors and letting them run the organization and sort of choose the organization's mission. So there's so many details here that I would like to know about this situation, but in general, we are all going to make decisions as fundraisers that cause donors to leave. That's part of the gig.
Yeah, it's painful. It hurts.
It's painful.
Yeah, in the short term, but I think your words are well founded. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you, Stephen. I'm so grateful for this conversation today. I'm so grateful for everyone who's been listening in, contributing with questions, and participating in that way. Money for Ministry serves faith-minded and specifically Christian ministries and charities, both Protestant and Catholic. I know at Better Fundraising, you serve a very wide range of nonprofits and ministries, but our heart is to see the church thrive and flourish in all its forms, and to help ministries like those who are represented on this call multiply faith stories this quarter and in 2023 and beyond. So in that spirit, I'd like to close with some words of comfort and some words of blessing. The first is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, and then the second is from the prophet Isaiah. So hear these words of good news from Philippians. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. And then secondly, from the prophet Isaiah. And I just love these words because I think it speaks to each person. But now, this is what the God of Jacob and Israel says. He who created you, he who formed you, do not fear. For I have redeemed you, I have summoned you by name, and you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and the flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God. So I hope these bring, our time together has brought comfort and hope, and also some strategy, and given you peace for your work today. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.